now is Tim Miller, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican road to hell. Tim Miller is on Team Normal. He's a leader in the anti-Trump movement, former Republican operative. I think that's how I got to know him. Right now, a lot of you are familiar with Tim because he's an MSNBC analyst. He's a writer at The Bulwark. He was the communications director for Jeb Bush's 2012 presidential campaign, 2016 presidential campaign. And he was the RNC spokesman for the 2012 campaign when Mitt Romney was the Republican candidate. Now, if Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney tell you something about Tim's politics, I think you're right. So anyway, Tim, thanks for joining us. We have a lot to cover. And for our viewers especially, I know we want to talk about what you think is the future of Adam Kinzinger, the Illinois congressman who's on the January 6th committee. But I just want to at least read a few passages from your book to set up our conversation. As we talk about what we may agree is a pretty dangerous time for our democracy in the United States, what with almost every day, either a revelation on the run-up to the January 6th insurrection and former President Trump's attempt to overthrow the election, to the FBI raid at his Mar-a-Lago estate looking for records covered by the Presidential Records Act that he took. But anyway, we'll get to all this. So everybody, let me just tell you what Tim wrote.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so remember, I just set this up that America's pretty much in a pickle. Well, it's because of Tim. That's what he says. America never would have gotten into this mess if it weren't for me and my friends. We were the normal Republicans, the pragmatic and practical, the adults in the room you hear so much about. Now, I'm skipping a little bit, but at first, gradually, after everything they knew about Trump, first gradually, he writes, and then suddenly, nearly all of us decided to go along. The same people who roasted Donald Trump as an incompetent menace in private served his rancid baloney in public when convenient. And they decided to do so even after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So, Tim, I want to go through a case study with you on a person who I actually knew when she was a student. And so there is, so Tim in this book tells his story, his journey of being a Republican operative, of dealing with his coming out as a gay man in an environment that sometimes did not welcome gays and lesbians. So some of this is a little bit of a memoir in the book, and some of it is his own exploration to why he went along at first, and then he talks to the people who did. But there's a woman who is a state representative from New York, whose name is Elise Stefanik. And of the case studies that you do, Tim, I want to if we're going to smush together Elise Stefanik because I knew her when she was a student at Harvard. She was a protege of Ken Duberstein. And again, for our listeners who don't know Ken Duberstein, moderate to conservative, but certainly establishment Republican. Not anyone who would come close to a conspiracy theorist or an election denier, at least at a safe district in New York. And then as soon as the January 6th attack happened, and some Republicans seemed to defend it, Liz Cheney, still in leadership, made it clear what she thought. She's one of the 10 Republicans to vote to impeach Trump. And then Elise Stefanik becomes a person that I didn't think I knew. So can you just tell us and condense what you write about her and her journey and what it shows about the state of the party today?
Sure. It's so good to be with you, Lynn, a legend. After all this time reading you, we have dealt with each other a little bit, but I'm a quasi-journalist now. I'm a writer. We're on the same side of this deal now, so it's so good to be here. Elise, The people I wrote in the book, with really one exception, all of the characters in the book were people that I knew really well before I started writing the book, and it's because I get into people's motivations. That's the whole point of the book. It's called "Why We Did It." Why, there have been plenty of great reporters you've had on this podcast, and you yourself and others who have done the what part of what is going on. But I tried to get at the why, and I felt like to do that I had to deal with people that I had either worked with or knew. And so Elise and I worked together on the 2012 GOP autopsy, which, if people don't remember, basically was, recommending that the party it was a reskin of the compassionate conservatism, frankly. How can the party, appeal more to the diversifying America, to suburban women? How do we not turn these people off? Elise was the editor of that document. She doesn't, this isn't on her bio anymore, but so I was the spokesman, as you said, at the time. So we worked very closely on getting this document together. Then she runs for Congress with that document as basically the blueprint, and hires a bunch of other young millennial, pro-gay, believe in climate change Republicans who are like, this is the future of the party. And some of them who I interviewed told me that, this was the best they ever felt about a campaign. It was the most hopeful. It was exactly the type of Republican they wanted to work for. And it acts this way, all the way through like Trump's first year. She never mentions him, doesn't tweet about him, is basically indistinguishable from Adam Kinzinger, right? All the way through like 2017 or 18. And then during the first impeachment, she flips on a dime and basically says, I can get a lot more juice if I'm defending Trump full-throatedly. And then obviously, as you mentioned, she shivs Liz Cheney. So the question is why? Well, everyone I called to ask gave me the same answer, which is this is what her voters want. This is what the voters want. She's a representative representing the voters. But I was like, that's not really right. It didn't land right with me, because she's in New York right next to John Katko, who voted to impeach. And their districts are right next to each other. They have very similar districts in the kind of Albany, Buffalo, kind of region. And so I was like, that isn't right. And what I discovered as I interviewed more and more people and like thought back about it is that Elise Stefanik just decided that she wanted the brass ring, that she wanted the cheers. Like, she could have survived as a congresswoman probably by being more skeptical, being less vocal, but she couldn't have been on the trajectory that she's on. And right now she's on, I think, a short list to be Donald Trump's VP next time, and a short list to be a Speaker of the House. And so it's paid off for her.
Well, as you raise the question throughout the book, at what cost? But you too, at some point, you write about, you were blind to this. You kind of thought it was icky, but you did it anyway. You flirted with Steve Bannon. You wanted to get your Oppo research into Breitbart and other outlets. You even, and this surprised me, I didn't realize it, once Trump was elected, you even helped Scott Pruitt get confirmed as the EPA administrator. Mm-hmm. Tell us what was going through your mind. I mean, I know because I read it, but for people who haven't, what on earth?
Well, this is embarrassing to always say in the interviews, but the whole point of this is just to be honest. This stuff is exhilarating, right? It just is. And so I get what Elise is doing grosses me out, right? But I had it at the smaller level, right? If I'm pitching a big story, it's on the front page of the newspaper the next day, or, we're on Fox, or I'm, at these parties and people want to talk to me, and I'm the intermediary between Steve Bannon and his little machinations and, the more normal Republicans, the Jeb Bushes and the Paul Ryans. That is exciting, right? There's an exciting element to it. When the stakes felt lower, I didn't reflect on it to the degree that I should have. And then as Trump wins, obviously the stakes started to feel a lot higher. I started to look back at my actions and think, gosh, the stuff that I found exhilarating was actually very damaging and had a lot of real world impact that I just didn't spend enough time really focusing on what the potential consequences of my actions are. And that, I think, continues for all the people who continue to work there. They are in this bubble in DC where they're protected from the consequences of their actions. And the Scott Pruitt example is a little bit of a different motivator, because that wasn't that exhilarating. That was a horrible experience, actually. But I think it represents another class of Republicans, why they go along with this, which is that this is people's career. I didn't know what else to do. Donald Trump had won. I'd been a vocal Donald Trump opponent. I thought my life was in shambles. I thought my career was in shambles. I didn't know. I didn't, should I keep doing politics? Should I quit? Should I become a shepherd? Do I go back to college? Like, what do I do? Right. And Scott Pruitt calls and says, will you help me? do the thing you've always done, do PR and kind of help me message me. I said yes, just basically out of inertia. Like this is my life. I'm trying. I'm just moving the next rung up the ladder. I'm a mid-level person here. What is my obligation? And eventually, I realized that I had too great of an obligation, and it took me too long. But I said to Pruitt, I can't give you advice anymore. Like this is just too contrary to my values. But I think that there are a lot of people in Republican Washington who are working for people like Kevin McCarthy, who this is their justification. They did like, what else am I supposed to do? Like this is my career. I'm like a mid-level oil man after a spill. Do I quit my job? Do I go in the next day? And I think
So,
that's part of the rationalizations.
okay, so Tim, I'll cut you some slack. As far
Thank
as
you.
I know, you're not independently wealthy, you had to make a living. But you write about Todd Ricketts, who my viewers know. He lives in the Chicago suburbs. He is the co-owner of the Cubs. He comes from a fabulously rich family, and they are active up until Trump ran in 2016. They were involved in putting a lot of money into fiscal conservative causes. And then they fund, through his mother, Marlene Ricketts, an anti-Trump super PAC. You get a call from one of his guys, and you go to work for it.
What was that pause? What was the dramatic pause there, Len? You get a call from one of his guys.
Uh, because the call, I think I get it,
Yeah.
that call. And my point being, you probably then might have, and in your writing, and so everyone knows, when Tim writes about it, it's not revelatory, but it's revealing that as soon as Trump gets the nomination, all of a sudden the Ricketts are on board. And here is my point, I guess, when I think about Todd Ricketts, he was on board. Trump forgave him. He was nominated to be a deputy commerce secretary, and the paperwork and financial disclosures didn't work out. So he ends up as a fundraiser for the RNC. And even after knowing everything he knows after Trump, he continues to be the chief fundraiser for the 2020 election cycle. Okay, so there are people like you and others who write about you got to make a living. So maybe I'm going to give you a break here. When you look at the class of Republicans and the donor class that supported Trump, uh, what's your analysis of why they went along?
I love that you asked me about Todd. I could have done a whole chapter on Todd Ricketts. But
Yes.
people are like, most people are like, who cares about Todd Ricketts? But I did. It was fascinating. I thought I was,
We care
again,
about Todd
yeah,
Ricketts.
it was also exhilarating, right? It was, they funded this anti-Trump super PAC. I was like, great, I get to do what I'm good at, which is attack and do PR and go on TV and joust with Trump supporters, and pitch oppo research on Trump, and I get to feel good about it because it's the right
Yeah.
thing. Like it was such a cool job, and I was so lucky that Todd called me, and then yeah, you get invited to Cubs games, and right, you're in the mix. Is that right? About as a big draw about politics, and then Trump wins, and for him to call me a month later and say, "Ooh, we need to get back in his good graces. We're starting a pro-Trump PAC now. Do you want to be the spokesperson?" I was just like, that was insane to me. I said, our first PAC was called Our Principles PAC. like this is like Veep. Like what was our principle if you're going to support Trump? And this is I literally said this to him, Lynn. I was like, you are independently wealthy. You could do anything. You could join boards. You could move to an island and start a school for poor kids. You could just pick candidates. You could run for mayor. I don't know. You could do anything. The world is your oyster. And to want to be deputy commerce secretary or a fundraiser for someone that you just know that you knew was despicable, that you ran a PAC to stop, it really did boggle my mind, and I had to spend a lot of time trying to think about it. And the reality is that this drug, this addiction of feeling important, of all those other suggestions, maybe not running for mayor, but
Yeah.
being a board member, doing charity, starting a
For
nonprofit.
Senate, there's talk at one point that run for office in Illinois. If you have so many great ideas, run for
Yeah,
governor.
sure, but Illinois is a blue state. You're going to lose, right? Like this is easy path to feeling important. And people like to feel important. I wish that there was a deeper answer to this. I wish that there was, that there was some, when you underneath peel away the onions, there was some really deep seated principle or some care, but it's not. It's like these guys and women in Elise's case, but it tends to be guys, like to feel important. They like to be in the mix. They like to be invited to the White House. They like to be called secretary, and it's as simple as that. It was easy for them to look past all of the damage that Trump was doing, because he wasn't really doing it to them. You're in this privileged bubble where there aren't really any consequences of your own actions. And so the whole thing was just devastating. I said, I don't know if I said it to Todd. I think I said it to one of his guys. I literally sent an email that was like, I would not accept the deputy commerce secretary job. Like, I'm just a random PR hack. I don't have any family money, and I wouldn't take that job. Why do you want this job so bad? But that's it. Just this desire to be close to the White House, close to the action, is what drives these guys.
So, do these forces exist to be duplicated as Trump contemplates 2024 with all the various controversies swirling about him?
Yeah, absolutely.
As your book goes through, it's like the stages of grief. Well, maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe it is so bad. Maybe we could help. And again, readers, this book is very readable because it is part memoir, and we've had authors on who are taking more of a historical bent, or have inside information, which Tim does, but because it's his own journey kind of laid on the reportage for somebody who's on the inside, which is kind of cool because you knew the ground. So we're set the stage now where you think we're at with Trump, who cannot do it alone, no matter the cult-like power he has. Doesn't he still need the band of operatives and supporters, or what? What do you think?
Yeah. I tried very hard to make the book not homework. That was one of my top goals. A lot of these books are homework, so I'm glad
I can't read
that landed.
Because you have some, 4-letter words here. But anyway,
I do cut. I do. When my aunt said, "Did you have to cuss so much?" I was like, I was just trying to be real. I could have probably dialed back the cussing a little bit. Anyway, look, the what I come to is you give the example of the stages of grief. I would give the example. I don't know if you watch the show Squid Game, which is you're in all these levels where you're trying to get the money pot at the end, and they make you do all of these horrible things. You have friends that die, and I won't ruin the show, but the conceit is basically that you're already in so deep, it's like hard to then take a moral stand to leave, right? Like once you've already sacrificed so much, and what my book tries to get across is that all of these people, all of the rationalizations they had that got them to January 6th, because they all knew Trump was bad before January 6th. It wasn't like, this big revelation on the 6th that Trump was dangerous. Like, they all knew that, but they all had rationalized it using these various different reasons. And so maybe for a day or two after January 6th, like their consciences broke through, or they thought they had this off ramp. But once they realized the voters still wanted Trump, they went back to the same rationalizations. Like the whole reason that they got there hadn't changed. And so as far as 2024 is concerned, as long as it's a bottom up problem, unless the operatives have the courage, the to say no to him and to stop him, and there's no evidence that they will, then they will continue to go along with this as long as the voters demand him. And in the Republican Party right now, maybe it's softening a little bit, but he still has a huge following, a majority following among the supporters. And so I do think that maybe not every single person, I tell the story of Alyssa Farah, there'll be some outliers, but most of these same people will go along with it.
Right. We have it in a sense. If you watch MSNBC and CNN, we see some of the Trump people who have evolved into never Trumpers. But before we forget, I want to devote a chunk of time to Adam Kinzinger and their futures. And again, so our listeners know, when Adam Kinzinger first launched, this was in January 2021. I remember that you and I were on the same call where Kinzinger
Yeah.
talked about a movement he was launching in the wake of January 6th. And I think by then, had he voted to impeach? Was the impeachment vote? Might have happened by then, or it was
I
about
think
to.
it had happened. Yeah, I think it had
And,
happened.
he kind of he morphed from somebody who yin and yanged about Trump, voted for him, didn't, kind of liked, we, let me remind people, and I think I wrote stories about it. Trump really liked him at one time, and he was at the White House because he is a good looking guy who comes out of central casting as a military officer slash member of Congress, and Trump loved that. And I think Trump kind of liked the swashbuckling aspect of him. But then, boy,
And likes winning people over.
yeah,
Likes winning people over. Feels like you own them. If someone had criticized him and then starts to like him, he likes that.
right. But Trump couldn't own Kinzinger, and he started this battle against conspiracies, which turned into a battle against denialism, which turned into accepting an appointment on the January 6th committee with Liz Cheney, and we'll get to her in a minute. So again, he is finishing up his term in Congress. The Democrats remapped Illinois, and he just was in a bad position. He lived a little too far north to, get a district. The Democrats didn't care if they threw him in with another Republican, but probably no matter what he did, he would have had a hard time surviving a primary.
Yeah.
Now, we're in a state where the biggest Trump supporter, a freshman by the name of Mary Miller, beat another Trump-friendly incumbent, Rodney Davis. So, that gives you an example of Illinois politics. In the governor's race, Darren Bailey, who had Trump's blessing, even though it came a little late, he beat the other Republicans. Anyway, what do you think Kinzinger does for his future?
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna give you real talk. Adam and I are friends, so he hears from me directly, and so I'm just gonna say it. And we have disagree on some things, but it comes from respect. I tried to convince him to run against Trump in 2020 to primary him. Joe Walsh ends up doing it, another Illinois guy, but I thought that he would be nothing against Joe, but a little more credible, a little more serious of a challenge. I figured he would lose, but I thought it would be a good kind of platform for future. And we could take a few bites out of them. It didn't choose to do that, I think, for good reason. You take a lot of heat for a losing effort. And so now I think I love what he's doing with this little PAC, trying to help Republicans who are not conspiracists at these low level spots, Secretary of State, city of, auditor, these sort of jobs that didn't used to think were that important. Then all of a sudden, you've guys like Stephen Risher in Arizona and Brad Raffensperger who are like standing between us and autocracy. So I do think it's important that we have sane Republicans in those lower level spots. I think that's a good project for him, though. And I think this is where we kind of disagree. I don't think that there is a path left in the Republican Party for somebody that has been this harsh on Trump. And I do think that the Democrats would be more welcoming. And this is true. We can tie this into the Liz Cheney thing. Look, you looked at the Liz Cheney third party run. There was a poll out the other day, and all of her voters were Biden.
Yeah.
People like she took entire she had like 11%, and they were all people that in a two-way would have been Biden. She didn't take from Trump at all. So I do think there's a center left Democrat, suburban Democrat in the right district. They wouldn't mind taking a former Republican in certain districts. Probably not statewide in Illinois, but I think that there are targeted places where that might work. I think that, he still has some conservative views, doesn't want to do that. I get that. But I just think within the Republican Party right now, his position is not tenable. I think what he's done is super brave. I like what he's doing with his PAC, and we'll see. But I kind of think that's where things stand.
So Liz Cheney vowed that she'll do anything to make sure Trump is never reelected president. If she ran, then all she would do is help that cause if he were the nominee, because she would take votes from Biden. So,
in a third party, well, I think you could conceivably she could run. We'll see what she wants to do. She could run a Republican primary, and again, that'd be a kamikaze mission. But could you raise the salience of Trump's corruption? If he's running unopposed, or if he's running against somebody that's just a suck up, they're never going to talk about it. So if she's out there running ads on Fox News, can you peel off 3-4%? She got 20-something%,
right.
in her
So
primary. That's not a lot, but Democrat or to sit out. So I think she could play a meaningful role that way.
So do you think the Florida Governor DeSantis gets in even if Trump does, or is he just huffing, is he just setting himself up if Trump doesn't run?
Yeah.
What do you
And
think?
he's clearly the natural successor right now. I don't know if that's forever. We'll see how the midterms go. Sometimes new stars emerge. I just don't even want to say some of the names of some of these horrible people that are running as Republican little
Because
Trump imitators now. But like I don't know, Carrie Lake or somebody wins, and who knows? But DeSantis taking on Trump directly, it could conceivably work. We do focus groups at the Bulwark with Trump voters all the time, and we hear from they don't dislike Trump. They're not interested in Kinzinger at all. Kinzinger is a traitor, right? He's like the enemy of the people to these people. But some of them might say, "Well, I like Trump, but it'd be nice if he just moved aside with his baggage, and we could have DeSantis, and he was a nice cheerleader." That could happen
well,
conceivably.
if you want an election denier and a conspiracy monger, um, get DeSantis, who at least
Yeah.
is crazy in terms of governing, who at least isn't trying to. I mean, it's a shame that we have to even get to this level. It does strike me.
It's a low bar.
Yeah, filling that in. So, Pence, what's his future? None.
None. I wish he would testify. I don't understand why he won't testify, and I wish Liz Cheney. It'd be like I think Liz Cheney for me, she's gotten an A, and I should get an A plus for me as she was putting more public pressure on Pence and some of these other guys to testify publicly in front of the January 6th committee. Pence still thinks he has a future. I just don't see it. He's really in the sour spot with these voters. The tiny percentage of Liz Cheney voters in the party, they don't like Mike Pence. The MAGAs don't like Mike Pence, and even the people who are in the kind of I like Trump but I'm ready to move on, that kind of middle category, DeSantis is much more appealing to them than Pence. And there are going to be a number of other people that are. So I just never say never. Who the hell knows? Trump dies and blah blah blah. But right now there's not a really clear path for Mike Pence within the party.
Speaking of MAGA, so Joe Biden has taken to saying MAGA Republicans. He means it as a slur, a put down. I don't see what the point is, because it who I can who does it help? It doesn't seem to hurt. All it does is what it doesn't even seem
Yeah.
that clever to spit out MAGA Republicans, because the MAGA Republicans will probably only feel emboldened by it, or what? What's the
Yeah,
point?
I think he's grasping around. I also don't love it, but it's a real descriptor, right? If you look at the party right now, it's about 50% of what I would say these Trump Republicans, MAGA Republicans, they like Trump more than they like conservative old values. About 40% are like traditional conservatives, Christian conservatives who like Trump, and then about 10% are whatever, relatively anti-Trump or hostile. So it describes a portion of the party, and I think that what Biden and the Democrats are trying to do is say to that tiny 10% of Republicans and the swing voters, don't trust these 50%. They're the
Yeah.
real loons, like they're the real crazies. And so I think he's trying to find a way to explain that in a bumper sticker. I agree that it doesn't really land.
So right now, more Republican states and Republican governors are moving to make more restrictive abortion laws.
Yeah.
We saw what happened in Kansas, New York, Congressional District 19. The Democratic, who wasn't supposed to win, won, though he seemed like an appealing candidate, military, but he made abortion the main issue. Is this going to backfire on Republicans? They got what they wanted, or is it of limited value, do you think?
No, I think so, and I think that it didn't necessarily have to be this way. I don't. People forget. I think number one, it was going to engage Democratic partisans no matter what. So that was already going to happen. But a second thing has happened, right? People don't realize that about the big middle of the country is actually mixed on abortion. I know you don't. There are none of these people on cable TV, except for me. I think I might be the only one on all cable that holds these views. But there are a lot. Most of the country is like for abortion in certain cases that should be legal in certain cases, and there should be certain reasonable limits. Late and second trimester, third trimester, whatever. That's the majority position. Okay. So had Republicans stuck with that and done their like 20-week bans, 25-week ban with exceptions, do a more European proposal. It's similar to what Youngkin maybe is proposing in Virginia. I do see, I think, in Arizona. I don't think that would have hurt him that much. It would still Democrats still would have been engaged more, so it might have hurt him a little bit on the edges. But we're seeing in Kansas is the actual position of no exceptions, 1 week ban. That is like a 10% position. No one's for that except for very active Republicans, right? Arizona, these swing states. If they have governors running on no exception bans, that is putting them in a very, very bad position. I think it's going to cost Republicans more than the insurrection in a few places around the country, for sure.
Well, will it cost Democrats right now in the Illinois governor primary and in a few other places? The Democrats went in and played in the Republican primary to get the Trumpiest
Yeah.
person nominated. I think it's playing with fire because even if they lose, they still have given credentials to someone as the leader of their pack. When we look at the larger threat of Trumpism, is there a problem for you in this Democratic strategy as someone who knows, as you would call it in your book, the game of politics?
Yeah. I don't love it. But here's the thing that I try to get at in my book about the politics is still going to be a competition, right? The game that got out of control that I'm critical of is just this nihilism, not caring about the voters, not caring about what the potential impact of your actions could be. And I do think in certain cases, like in the Peter Meyer primary, what the Democrats were doing was really over the line.
And that's in Michigan.
That's in Michigan. Yeah. I'm a little bit more of a mixed view on like the Illinois governor's race. It's extremely unlikely the Republican's going to win that race regardless. If he does, it's not as if Illinois in a presidential year is going to be the state that our democracy hinges on, right? In the way that some of these swing states are. I just think it's kind of like a lower risk play. I don't love the karma of it still. But I understand why Democrats trying to be aggressive. I just think they need to be a little bit more careful. Pennsylvania is a different situation, right? Like that guy, Doug Mastriano. Let's say Trump once again in 2024, and it all comes down to Pennsylvania, and they change the rules with this super ultra pro-insurrection governor to really to do voter suppression laws and change the way votes are counted. That's really playing with fire in a way that I don't like. So to me, it's a case by case situation.
On it. So I want to get back to Trump and all these investigations. Besides, so we have January 6th probe that will resume in a few weeks. Justice Department. The latest is whatever will happen from taking documents, the FBI raid. And again, so people know, presidents don't own documents. They're supposed to turn over everything. If this was in the White House and I have some scribbled notes, this would be logged and maybe digitalized, but you can't get rid of it. And Tim, you may not know this, but the Barack Obama Presidential Library exists in a suburb of Chicago in an old furniture store, because Obama decided he didn't want the official National Archives library in his Obama Center that he's building, but they had trucked the stuff up. But the stuff exists. Even though Trump said he shipped them to Chicago, NARA shipped them. My point being, what do you think exposes Trump more? I mean, is he still impervious to this? We have the Georgia grand jury going on right now, which is serious. Legal attempts to influence 2020. We have attempts in 2022 about making off with documents that aren't yours. And I know we make a big deal about them being classified or super secret. You shouldn't take them no matter what they are. So will any of this have an impact, you think, on Trump if he decides to run, or even on the midterm elections?
I think, well, the last one's an easier question. I think it's having some effect on the midterm elections because it's keeping Trump in the news and in a way that matters. Negative polarization. So again, we talked about the Democratic voter engagement going up because of Dobbs, and that's a proactive reason. But there are other Democrats who are really more engaged by negative partisanship. They're more likely to turn out if they think Trump and these crazy Republicans are going to be in charge than they do really care about Mark Kelly or whatever in Arizona. So I think that matters. It's helping the Democrats on the margins in the midterms. As far as whether Trump is impervious, I don't let myself have hope that he's going to be arrested, Lynn. He's obviously a criminal. I would love for him to be arrested. It would, make me a very happy man out here in Oakland. But we got to let all this stuff play out. Like, how can you find a jury that would be unbiased? That would be a jury of his peers. How do you even do that? I mean, we're really in unprecedented waters here. But that doesn't mean that the legal system shouldn't, go and treat this just like they would treat plenty of other ex-politicians who have gotten in trouble. It's not like Trump is the first one. You've had a couple politicians over there who have been behind bars. So I just think we got to let it play out.
But one of the, you can't use the word unprecedented enough and rock bottom enough when you cover or report or work for Trump. And the phenomena, the ability of him to keep replicating successfully through the fundraising he's doing off of every one of his investigations, the people that still flock to him for a rally, they see his defects and they go along with it. But having said this, if we are gaming out a little bit in 2024, who would be his running mate? Who is it going to be? Mr. Pillow, Mike Lindell, someone like that? Who I noticed you didn't use his name when you wrote about him in the book, but you didn't use his name. Was that deliberate?
The Pillow Man. That's he's so ridiculous. Yeah, I think the only way to treat him is to mock him. He deserves mockery. But no, I don't know if it was intentional. Otherwise, I was trying to get a laugh. It's some very heavy stuff. So I do my best in the book to try to, give at least a little bit of dark humor for folks throughout. But his running mate, look at who is all still with him. Of course, he'll be able to get a running mate. He had 7 senators and 10 House members voted to impeach. Yeah. They've all come to his defense on this stuff. Even the relatively more on the normal side, the team normal, if you will, the Marco Rubio and et cetera, they've come to his defense. So I don't, I look at the women. I think that probably he wishes he had chosen a woman last time. And you got Carrie Lake, like I said, Elise. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Elise, Carrie Lake, I think, are 2 that jump to mind. Kristi Noem. Yeah. I think he would have his choice, which is, again, insane that after watching that he sent a mob to essentially assassinate his vice president and has completely trashed him now in the fallout of that someone would sign up for that. But ambition's a hell of a drug, Lynn.
So we're winding down and we're in our closing moment here. So last question. Can Trumpism exist? When you have this blindness to reality in a sense, can this exist without Fox News just getting all in again as they did? Or can it exist to the power that it has without having a Fox 100% behind it? If the powers to be at Fox, besides, some of the nighttime hosts just say, we like DeSantis, less controversial, we could go with that. What's the media outlook?
Yeah, no, Fox has a huge impact. I had one chapter in the book on the media and how operatives deal with the conservative media because I thought it was important. I initially had 3, but I thought people would get bored. But that's how important I think it is. Conservative media is critical to his survival. So the question is, does it matter, right? Like, I don't think that with Ailes gone, Fox doesn't have somebody who's like a strong hand at the top that could make everybody sing from the same hymn book on something like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's like realistic to think Fox could just move on to DeSantis. But I would just say in closing, like the difference and a lot of the corruptibility and a lot of these base instincts that I talk about in my book are human instincts that have happened throughout time, but we've created a culture that I think has exacerbated them, a political culture. And you just look back to Nixon as the prime example of this. Does Nixon, it's an easy counterfactual. Does Nixon resign Actually, if he has a Fox News, if he has a Breitbart, if he has this whole social media apparatus of people who are supporting him and standing with him, I don't think so. We'll never really know, but I do think that Trump was propped up, and Trump's lies and his corruption and his illegal acts were insulated by this massive conservative media bubble that has developed over the last 30 or so years.
And with that, our time is coming to an end. Tim Miller, thank you, Tim Miller, the author of Why We Did It, a travelogue from the Republican road to hell. Take care, Tim.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been great.